we've seen a string of people falling off balconies and out of windows and other things. But the case of Roman Stavoit, the Minister of Transport up until yesterday, is very significant because it's actually connected to Ukraine. Because between 2018 and 2024, he was the governor of Kursk region, which last summer was invaded by Ukraine in a surprise attack. And the defenses, which had supposedly been fortifications that had been put in place in Kursk region after the start of the war, proved to be absent. And naturally, an investigation on the Russian side began into why money allocated for the purposes of building fortifications had not been invested properly and had probably gone into bureaucrats' pockets or into other things. So the governor who replaced Stavoit, he is in jail at the moment on some corruption charges, and I suspect something similar was coming the way of Stavoit himself. So did he commit suicide? We just don't know. But he was probably looking at a potentially quite lengthy jail term if he'd been found guilty. And the way the Russian court system works, if you're charged with an offence like that as an official, there's probably a pretty good chance you're going to end up behind bars. And there's a case certainly of one Russian general recently who received, I think, a 13-year jail sentence on some embezzlement charges, and as somebody who was in fact a hero of Russia, had that sort of status in the armed forces, and yet they're not immune to this sort of investigation. So I think in Stavoit's case, that probably explains what the nature of the problem was. But for somebody to receive their news they've been fired as transportation minister, and obviously criminal charges piling up, it was unexpected that he should die in this way.
And as you mentioned there, it's not the only suspicious death of a quite high-ranking person in the Russian elite. Earlier this week as well, Andrei Badalov, vice president of Transneft, which is an oil company largely owned by the Russian government, he was found dead after a fall from a building he lived in. It's not known how this happened, but when and why do Russian oil executives and the like tend to die under these sort of suspicious circumstances?
It's a bizarre situation, and it's very difficult to offer an explanation here beyond the fact that this is a dirty business, and Badalov was working for Transneft, which operates the pipeline system, in fact, in the country, and therefore is responsible for quotas of oil, which are then exported. And I don't know to what extent he might have been caught up in some form of illegal business. It's perfectly possible, although he appeared to be, from the accounts I read, responsible for modernizing digital systems in the company. It didn't seem to be handing out quotas directly. So who knows whether it was a signal to somebody he was allied with, but the death most certainly looks suspicious. And you're right. There have been other senior executives from I think Gazprom's, from some other Russian companies who've also, over the last 3 years, died in mysterious circumstances, and not just in Russia, by the way. There was certainly one family that died in Spain, I believe. And the assumption there is that the Russian executive, the father in his family, had shot his wife and children and then turned a gun on himself. But I simply don't have the information to be able to judge what might be going on here. But all one can observe is that there seems to be a very relatively large proportion of people dying in suspicious circumstances, and that suggests that all is not well in that domain.
And elsewhere, just yesterday, gold tycoon Konstantin Strugg was banned from leaving Russia and purportedly had his assets seized by the FSB. Strugg was very much, from what I've read, an ally of Putin. How has he ended up seemingly on the wrong side of the Kremlin, do you think?
Very hard, again, to know the precise reason for this, but he had acquired this gold company on the cheap, when it went bankrupt some decades ago, I believe. Then built it up and became, in his own right, pretty wealthy. One account I read suggested that he was worth, personally had wealth of about a couple of $billion, which is really quite significant here by Russian standards. And it may just be that somebody had decided that he'd profited enough from that business, he'd done well enough, and that he needed to share the proceeds elsewhere. That's very often the case in these states that have strong mafia elements to them. So it rather feels though he might have got caught up in something like that. You're absolutely right. He was perceived as an ally of the Kremlin. He was in fact sanctioned by the UK, I believe, after the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, just over 3 years ago. And he was also a member of a regional assembly and part of the United Russia Party, the Kremlin's political party, if one can call it that, a political movement. So he, in many ways, seemed to be, on side with the authorities. But when we talk about the authorities, there are different groups within them, competing interests. And the Kremlin is not always in a position to referee these competitions that take place between business people and business groups, and it's quite likely that he again got caught up in something that just sort of spiraled out of control, and then he's suddenly another statistic.
What do these events say about the way that Putin's Russia operates under these sort of wartime situation it's found itself in?
Well, we can see that there's been a real tightening of control because the country is at war. The elites are the people around Putin, many cases those who work with him over 20 years or more. Some of those people are getting old. Some are being replaced. There's some new blood being brought in. And it does seem that Putin is probably preparing for the fact that he will leave office in the coming years. And he's trying to set up a system that's not going to go after him when he leaves power. So there are people being brought in, I would say, family connections, people who can be very much trusted. So that process is taking place at the same time as within the country. A chunk of the business elite has not done well as a result of the war because of sanctions, having to divert to other markets, the economic pain that's been piled on the country. Those people lost out, and yet there are others within the system who have gained because of the high level investment, for example, in the defense industry and other related branches of industry. So within the Russian system, despite this imposition of control, particularly on society and very sort of repressive machinery working, as far as we can tell, quite effectively, you've got movement within the system itself. And I think that may be creating some challenges. And just because of the way the decision-making system in Russia functions, it's so top-down, so centralized, it's difficult to control everything. And when Putin's also trying to fight a war, not particularly successfully, by the way, this is consuming a lot of bandwidth. So I suspect that there are people with a sense that they can play a little bit around the edges and seek opportunity in these conditions. But it's a perilous game.
You've been watching or listening to Frontline for Times Radio with me, Louis Sykes. For more on the war in Ukraine, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and sign up for a membership, or you can hear all the latest news and analysis on Times Radio or read it at thetimes.com. And remember, we are in both podcast and video form. You can find us on your favourite podcast platform. It's Times Radio's Frontline, or you can watch us on Times Radio's YouTube channel. Thanks very much. Goodbye.